I am for doing any type of strategy that has a chance of working. And I think Brian's strategy can be used quite effectively. I do want to see how Congress and other people will respond because, you know, they're also very well versed in conquering and dividing. This strategy, even though it might be very effective, and it will only, it needs to be taken effect very quickly. The longer it takes to go into effect and the more people get used to it, they will find a way to break this apart. I would like to expand in this cause. I don't think it just has to be limited to those 10 states. I believe that we could also pressure some other smaller local elections. But I think if we distribute this strategy to all the different organizations that we have contact with across the nation, it will serve as a very effective attack. It coordinated correctly though, but
my thoughts would be what kind of Medicare are we talking about? Like what model would this be shooting for?
public option.
Public option. So
I didn't think go far enough either.
There are things that the majority of the Black community, as far as the ones that I've talked to, would not sign on this just because this isn't speaking to them. Who decided these, three main, who voted those in, or is this one man's design? Or
so first I just wanted to respond to Nissan's point, which was, the point of having these 50 policies is to bring in all the different groups with their own members and that they have in their silos, and to have a broad base of people that have something in here that they're passionate about, to get on board with, to get action. Yes, this can spread out further, but those 10 states are like the most targeted place to start for 2022. Jimin, you asked like how this was developed, and so the answer, this also goes back to what Nissan's question of like how do you stop this from being abused? How do you make sure it's not torn down and used for evil, essentially? Because the idea of crowdsourcing democracy is a powerful one, and cutting out the middleman and representing ourselves could be used in harmful ways. And so for the last 4 years, a group of people, we've been observing a monthly fast on the 15th of each month as a shared self-sacrifice, to say, as a commitment to working together. And the people who have participated each month have voted on different policies, have brought their issues forward. And over the last fall, when we developed this list, I'll back up just a little bit further, Jimin. So the other part of your question is like, how did this list get developed? And that's sort of the answer, essentially a listening tour of what are all the injustices in America that people brought forward. And they kind of sorted themselves into categories, they just kind of naturally fell into the end poverty, end mass incarceration, and the endless wars. And they fell a lot faster once we realized that that lined up with Dr. King's triple evils, that there was sort of this natural linkage between a lot of these injustices. And then so specifically, it was developed in 2020 and then refined further in 2021 and ratified by the members through the group fast. Those who fasted got a chance to participate and make primary objections and say, look, this is a deal breaker. The fact that there's a codification of the Hyde Amendment for 10 years was a deal breaker to some people. I said, no, absolutely not. I'd rather nothing be done than approve of that. And so, I can understand if a public option is a primary objection, that the status quo is preferable to seeing the rest of this passed. But the fact is that these policies will vastly improve the quality of life for most Americans. And so I'd ask you to consider, whether it's really worth making a primary objection when we have the opportunity to come together and assert ourselves assert our power over Congress again.
So I don't really see this as something that is actually against parties. specifically, because I think the use of political parties with this agenda on there as a line of attack, I mean, would be effective because third party people are obviously unaffiliated and they could, again, choose whoever they do in general. And they could just pose a threat like, hey, if you're not going to vote, we're going to vote for our own candidate here that's going to endorse this. So if you get this on a national scale and get this viral, people are like, okay, here's the plan. This is what we're going to do and we'll execute it. But it has to be executed all at once and it has to be really tight. So one shot at this, the way I see it, because after that one shot, they're going to find a counter to this really quickly.
But by allying with, disgruntled voters who don't have any loyalty to either of the two parties, yeah, I think there's a natural synergy between like the People's Party and the American Union.
I definitely see this scenario working. I just see different things being not that what the three main issues that you have lined up. I see that that they are definitely needed to remedies for them. I would want to see like the ethnicity of the people making those three things what they are. I would want to see what that statistically look like, ethnically based, because to me, just it looks like it's forgetting a class of people. And like I said, I definitely see the promise in a thought like this. I just again, I'm going to keep on going back to it. This model definitely forgets about the Black constituency. So that would be, that again is 400 plus years behind everyone else.
I asked him in why he feels that that be against the Black constituency specifically.
I'd also be curious about the answer because I
What's
have the
that?
exact opposite impression.
I want to know exactly what part of this idea you find that is against the Black community specifically, because I mean, I don't know. What?
It's not speaking to the redress of the Black community. The fact that Abraham Lincoln, 40 acres and a mule, man, that's it. Like the Black community is saying, if you don't deal with that, you don't have us as a majority. So for anyone not to see that, that's kind of, in my opinion, being pig-headed.
Well, you could technically take the Black collective and do the same exact idea and pose it to your communities to add the 40 acres and a mule. The strategy is still the same. It just you would have to write that as legislation.
You're saying for that, so you're saying come from a different angle, use the same theory.
Yeah, you have to actually write that as legislation. I mean,
Right.
What does 40 acres and a mule mean? I mean,
today it would be 40 acres and a Tesla, some people are saying, or this or that, like,
okay, well, that has to be written as a legislation.
So you're saying that this can be three main things, the three main goal. I guess I'm getting like, I'm trying to buy into what this is saying, but it doesn't speak to me as part of the Black constituency. What you're saying is take the three things that they have away, implement the strategy with,
No, just you could just add what legislation is on top, like you're asked.
Okay.
Just add the legislation on top. There's no legislation there. That's just the theory. 40 acres and a mule.
Right.
Why don't you get the Black caucus to come together and actually write the actual legislation? That's the plan.
Well, they will, but I thought this was only specifically meant to go under the three that they, whoever they are specified as being like the three things they were gonna go,
I think you're reading too much into it. It was just like, this is the main cause that they heard, so they wrote it down. Apparently, the Black people did not write their causes down in legislation to give to him.
Well,
Else it would have probably been there.
Power to the people. Yes, sir. No, if you could take that, implement this status with different, and I don't know how that would look for the United American Union. Like I said, I would definitely write the legislation different, or write what the three focal points differently, coming from someone that has heard, and been in depth with the Black constituency. So that's all I was saying. I just feel it doesn't speak to us enough, but I appreciate Nissan what you said, and I do see plausibility to this, and being a strategy that could work if you kind of flash flood it, and just like Nissan said, like right in their face, oh, it's right here, because the next time or whatever, they're probably going to be ready for you. But I definitely could see this working.
I see a possibility to disrupt the duopoly, to take this system that we have. And in other words, like if we had the 10 senators and 20 representatives, that would be enough to change the conversation. And once we change the conversation, I think a lot of people would show up that are just not showing up now because they feel frustrated and left out and not addressed. So
For sure. So as I think about the parties, and as a trainer for the Racial Equity Institute, I have been studying and researching a lot of data and policies that the Democratic Party has specifically targeted poor people and marginalized people. And then we can also see on the right side, right, where the Republicans have specifically targeted marginalized and poor people. So we see that they're both doing the same thing, just different names. So two different wings, I guess, of the same evil bird, right? And it's like, how are we going to build collective power? How are we going to organize and challenge that structure? It's almost like it was created by design. Is that I think so many folks are missing the mark when it comes to organizing. I think that we're so used to talking about political engagement as far as like voting and registering people to vote. And like, that's huge. But when we knock on doors, we can't just say, hey, vote for Eric Robert or vote for this person or that person, right? We're missing the whole mark of organizing. You have to say, hey, I'm Kanai, who are you, right? Like the whole relationship building aspect, right? Like of forming relationships, building relationships, and then utilizing relationships, I think is one of the most important parts that's missing in organizing and just building collective power.
agree with that. The connection is the important thing, and that's what I hope we do here tonight, is that whether we agree, we know that we're all moving in the same direction and we have a good heart and we wish each other the best and we support each other in what we're doing. So thank you for that.
The hardest part though, Eddie, though, is persuading people that we have the power, to actually change the system, because people have gotten so disillusioned over the last 20, 30 years, and they've just given up. And that's why so many people, I believe, don't vote, because they see what happens is a politician says, elect me and I'll do this. And then they don't. And even if they go there with the best of intentions, a lot of times it's just, they can't. They go there and they try and build consensus after the fact around the things that they promised, and they're just not able to do it. And so again, that's the benefit of turning the model around, building the consensus first, making the demands first, and then casting the vote second. So that, again, so that we're empowering the people that we elect to already have consensus around these kind of things, to get these solutions enacted. And again, because they're written down, you can't complain after the fact about the details and like, oh, I didn't know what was in the bill. Yeah, everyone in America has the opportunity to know what's in it and decide if they have any primary objections or if they prefer the status quo. I go back to Jamin's question about the Black community. And I guess to the extent, Jamin, that you want to see something very specifically for the Black community, like specifically spelled out in it, it's not in this legislation. This is designed to appeal to all Americans and be race neutral. And there's no identity politics in here. it's for all Americans equally and evenly, universal basic income, public option, reforming the criminal justice system. But just as a matter of fact, those things disproportionately will benefit communities of color because they're the ones who have gotten so screwed by the status quo for hundreds of years. And so by just establishing a new equal floor, by scrubbing the laws of a lot of these things that have maybe aren't racist on their face, but have racist outcomes. Again, this is specifically designed to disproportionately benefit communities of color because you guys are the deciders. You guys have the ability to control the outcome. You guys have the power to be the deciders. And as long as the Democratic Party takes the black vote for granted, then you don't really have any leverage over somebody who's if you're gonna vote blue no matter who. So by being willing to walk away, by being willing to go on strike, that's where a union has the power. So I hope you can, even if you don't get everything you like in here, I hope that you can see the value in challenging the status quo.
I did. I was gonna ask Edon, just from another person that looks like me, how do you feel about the American Union, and what's your perspective? What's your take on it?
Yeah.
Being in North Carolina out there with Brian,
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from
Yeah, great question.
you.
So, as a trainer for the Racial Equity Institute, I travel all over the country and educate folks on race, why was it created, how structural racism shows up in every system, whether it be healthcare, housing, education, banking. The thing that we often say is that we can't fix race-based problems with race-neutral solutions. And that's really difficult for folks to grasp, right? Because we think we have to be neutral, and when we talk about race and who we're trying to help. And I understand what Brian was saying. Like, we are in those three main points. When I first saw them, I'm like, yeah, all those 3 points, Black people are disproportionality is like an all-time high, right? For all three of those. So Black people would benefit from those 3 points. So I'm not taking that away, but I'm also adding that there's actually more benefits for trying to solve structural issues using racial language in that process. So an example would be like redlining, right? We know redlining was a structural thing that specifically targets Black people or poor people, right? So that means we have to have a policy or like a legislation, like Nissan was saying, that actually says for Black people. And I think like Nissan was saying as well, that means that Black people have to organize, which is really difficult, to build collective power, to have a common language, a common understanding, and then say, this is what we're advocating for, and then put that in legislation. But I definitely just want to lift up the work that Brian is doing in TC. And I think it is going to help all people, and especially Black people as well.
Hey, we have someone, Bob, you're new. You want to introduce yourself?
Okay, yeah, my name is Bob Foxworth. I'm a fledgling activist,
Right.
27 years or so.
Affirmative action, right? I think that's one of the best examples, because we know that Black people have been marginalized, not just Black folks, but other folks of color and women, right? They've been marginalized. So affirmative action was supposed to even the playing field, but because they had race neutral language, it didn't do that. In fact, it actually widened it. The greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action are white women. White women benefit the most from affirmative action, which means white families, white people benefit the most from this legislation. So when we think about what I mean, or we can't solve race-based problems or race-neutral solutions, I think affirmative action is a good example on that.
The thing is that, having been in politics for 20 years, the question is, how do we actually implement the solution? How do we get there? And the answer that I'm proposing here is, first, we have to shift America from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance. We have to get ourselves in a place where people can feel secure and then look around and see what else needs to be fixed and addressed. The proposal, in order to get us to this better place, I believe first we have to be willing to come together as Americans and come together, and so that then we can look back and look inward and address these future wrongs. But to start and say, let's all come together around a package that specifically calls out a certain subset of the population for extra benefit, I think is a much harder sell. I don't think it can be sold. I could be wrong.
I mean, I think we all have the greatest hurdle is getting over this political apathy, as you stated. Because I mean, just going out talking to people, you know, getting them to engage in anything without having their minds shut off as soon as they hear something about politics is very hard at these points. And it's only really getting harder. The new generation seems to be very politically active, which is good, but they're still excluded from the process as of now. So it's like maybe it's a timing thing. Like, when will the new generation get to that age limit where they can flip over without getting disenfranchised? That is something we got to look into. Because I don't know how we could turn this generation and get them over this political apathy. There's no one has actually come up with a psychological framework of how to do that. One of the biggest things that even our founding fathers understood is that a system only works if you participate in it. So if you get people to stop participating in it, it no longer works.
What I'd hoped was to have my friends and people like me that aren't that active to get excited about this and get turned on and join in. And of course, the only people that showed up are you guys that are all already activists and going for it. So this apathy, this people aren't getting involved, and I'm not sure what to do about that other than I've been told to change my attitude. But y'all all showed up, fed my spirit big time.
Yeah. Once again, it was a pleasure being here. Like I said, I see that same problem you just brought up, Thomas or TC. I see the same issue, and I think you have to give them something. I mean, initially bite into and really feel they're getting spoken to their people, like however Native, Black, however Asian, So I think we need to. We're really coming up with something really cool on the United People's Assembly side of things, with some really cool economical ideas. And I think that will give people that, we got to have that carrot, man. I really believe there has to be that carrot. People are tired of getting shit on in advance, and so I really think we got to think of that carrot, man, and giving each people something.
I think that the issue we have here is largely the real definition of ignorance and apathy. What is the difference between ignorance and apathy? And the answer from most folks is, I don't know and I don't care. So that people are the way we are. We are absolutely enamored of comfort. Comfort comes before everything. There's an old chant on the trail, the people united will never be defeated. Brian's idea would work if there was enough people united. It's a great idea, but it's very theoretical, I think. And we could do lots of things if people really cared about each other. That's one of the big failings we have. We're too busy. Not necessarily we don't care about other people. We're so busy tied up with ourselves and our families and our well-being that we lose sight of the general welfare.
There's two things that are kind of floating in my mind. The first thing is just lifting up what Brian and Nissan and Bob, so many others talked about. And it's about how do we get folks to be engaged in this, right? In this political awareness. And something that I noticed that really helped me is when I talk to individuals, I share stories with them and they share stories with me. And when they share their story and their experiences, I find a way to help them realize that their story and their experience is not a silo event. That right now it looks like they're having an individual issue, but it's actually a collective issue. And when we can help change the paradigm or shift their paradigm from looking at it from an individual level to a communal level, then we can start to have a commonality and have something that sustains relationships and sustains learning from each other and growing with each other. Is to look at our history like a big Monopoly game, right? Because we're trying to figure out, where do we go from here? How do we move? What's the next steps? How do we solve the issues, right? We're all solution oriented. And I was telling Bob earlier that Albert Einstein said a quote. He said, if he had an hour to solve a problem, he would choose the first 55 minutes to understand that problem. And Albert Einstein said the last 5 minutes, he's going to use it to solve that problem. And to be honest, we're not spending enough time understanding the problem. We're spending most of the time trying to work on the solution. But the problem is really deep. It's so deep that it actually started way before we became a country. But when we became a country, who was allowed to be a citizen of this country? Right? Who was able to get access to resources and opportunities? Who was able to build capital, and who was the capital? There's a monopoly game where we can say a specific group of people weren't allowed to play for the first 256 years. And then they said, okay, after 256 years, stop your whining, stop your complaining. 1965, you can join the game. And how do we think the monopoly board looks like after 256 years? Right? So we're saying, okay, we're going to give everybody free healthcare. We're going to give everybody free food. We're going to give everybody, because we care about this, but there's still people who are struggling. So I just want to end with, equal isn't always equitable.
So the thing to get people inspired to do is that when they get a chance to talk to a pollster and who wants to know, are they going to vote Republican or Democrat? Say, no, I refuse to play this lesser two evils game. I'm going to vote with the American Union endorsement. And so when that small percentage shows up in the polls, and that small percentage is the difference between winning and losing, that's when any politician will find ways to justify to themselves whatever has to be done to get that percentage of votes. And it's not like we're asking for horrible things. We're asking to end poverty, end mass incarceration, and the endless wars. So it should be a pretty easy sell. And we just got to get it in front of them. And that's.
I spend most of my life with trying to understand the problem. Because yes, the problem is deep and vast. The first thing I wanted to do was help formalize a network and get into a network of people, informants, to go in and try different methods and figuring out how things work, because a lot of people did not understand how the system even worked. They thought they understood it, but they did not. So the first thing was to see how the system worked and what was breaking the system. And I spent most of my time trying to figure out that very problem. And now we find ourselves in a historic age. We're seeing us at a time where we're in the midst of the collapse of empire that rivals the Roman Empire. And this is a very fragile time and a very beneficial time, because as we now get people to have the veil pulled out from underneath their eyes and the masks are ripped off, people are now starting to come to see the light of truth. And with that, we need to gather all our forces, muster all our strength, and focus on building this new infrastructure while this other structure is collapsing around us.
That's right.
Because you cannot have creation without destruction. So as we continue to, we should focus on continuing to build this coalition that we have been building up very strongly, and listen to all these great ideas and strategies that I hope to incorporate in one unified planned attack. Because be mindful that we're going against a well-organized counterintelligence structure of powerful elites. This is not some random one-off thing. This is strategic. And the only way we're going to do is come together and be just as strategic as them. And I feel together, once we have the opportunity to strike, we would do so together hand in arm. And I would like to stand with all of you together when that day comes, because I believe that we do have a chance to win. We know what's going to happen now, and we have to just make sure we're prepared and ready to act when the time is right. And right now, we're very close to the next Great Recession. Already the two big indicators, the Dow and bonds, the inverse of bonds have already taken place. So we know the timing already. It's around next 2 to 3 months. So be strong, be smart, and be unified. That is all.